Brought to you by Egan Insurance Agency.
And good afternoon. It is 1 o'clock. I'm meteorologist Chris Franklin at the Pinpoint Forecast Center. We do have new information. Nothing really has changed. Winds are still at 50 miles an hour, and that forward motion, which has been incredible, at 21 miles an hour. Nate, still not in the Gulf of Mexico. However, watches and warnings have been issued for much of the north central Gulf Coast. Let's take a look at those right now, because we do have hurricane warnings for part of our viewing area, but that includes coastal locations in Louisiana from Grand Isle eastward, and then our southern counties in Mississippi from the state line to, look at this, all the way to the Alabama-Florida state line. Those areas are under a hurricane warning, and that was because of the shift in the forecasted track. Now, tropical storm warnings are in place, that's that orange color, for areas along the coastline, Grand Isle westward to Morgan City, and then inland. So the city of New Orleans, river parishes, North Shore, we're under a tropical storm warning, hurricane warning. In other words, hurricane force winds are likely within the next 24 hours along the Louisiana coast, southern Mississippi, southern Alabama, but tropical storm force winds for basically the metro area, river parishes down toward the coast, west of Grand Isle, and on the North Shore. Here's where the storm is right now. And again, what has been really just incredible has been that forward motion, moving very, very rapidly. So it has not had a great deal of time to sit over that very warm, deep water in the Western Caribbean, which is good news. It does certainly look like convection is trying to get better organized around that center, and we are still anticipating, forecast from the Hurricane Center is also calling for continued strengthening of Nate as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico, and then just before making landfall somewhere along the northern Gulf Coast. Again, landfall still uncertain. You're getting a little bit better certainty as it moves closer to land. And again, we're still looking at probably a landfall later tomorrow night, maybe by 10 or 11 o'clock, just crossing parts of the southern Louisiana coast and moving toward southern Mississippi. But the latest coordinates, and I kind of widened out to give you an idea of the storm that we're talking about. And notice that there is convection from the Pacific Ocean across Central America. Here is Nate, but then you also have kind of somewhat associated, but not really, convection kind of across parts of Cuba and then continuing up toward the Keys. This entire system is not Nate. Basically, Nate is right here. It's a very small system. Tropical storm force winds are right near the center. They don't spread very far out away from the center. And I'll show you the wind forecast coming up in just a second. Again, what has been most impressive with this storm has been that forward speed at 21 miles an hour. So one, doesn't have a whole lot of time to strengthen. Usually fast-moving systems don't rapidly strengthen because that fast motion kind of almost tears itself apart. You really can't get that strong core structure that would be necessary to get a very rapidly developing system. Likely going to be a strong tropical storm by early tomorrow morning, and by 7 a.m. Saturday, you've got a storm that is just into our south, and it's within 12 hours of likely nearing landfall by the time it gets to 7 p.m. on Saturday night. 80-mile-an-hour winds, so we'll have a hurricane just off of the Louisiana coast, but making a little bit of a turn more towards the northeast in response to an upper trough. Now, I'll talk an upper ridge, and I'll talk about that coming up in just a second, kind of some of the steering influences that we're looking at. Forecast models are looking at a little bit better agreement for the next several hours of the storm, and even near landfall, calling for a little bit better agreement. Again, South Louisiana, we are still not out of the woods by any means. This track can adjust back over us, and we're looking at more of a direct landfall from Nate. So we're not out of the woods. Obviously, we like to see that shift away from the city, but that does not mean we are out of the woods completely. Let's take a look at the wind forecast. Yellow, those are the tropical storm force winds. Notice they do not spread very far away from the center. As it strengthens, we'll see those hurricane force winds right near the eye, or the center of the storm. I shouldn't say an eye, because we'll likely never see an eye with this storm. It's just not going to be very well defined. But as it moves near the coast, again, we could see hurricane force winds right near the mouth of the river, just near the tip of the mouth of the river, and then perhaps in southern Mississippi and coastal Alabama as it is making landfall. But notice those yellows and oranges, at least based on this model, We're not even looking at tropical storm force winds in the city of New Orleans. Now, certainly winds gusting beyond tropical storm force, but sustained winds probably more eastern New Orleans, St. Bernard Parish, most of Plaquemines Parish, maybe southern Jefferson Parish, and then as it moves inland, you've got those tropical storm force winds from the Mississippi coast into lower Alabama and the Florida Panhandle. Again, we're going to kind of go through some of the steering and more in-depth analysis of the storm on Facebook Live. So if you'd like to hear a little bit more about what's expected of Nate and kind of the steering, a little bit more details of some of the impacts, please join us on Facebook Live. But for those watching us on Channel 4, we're now going to return to our regularly scheduled programming.
This has been a Pinpoint Weather Alert, brought to you by Egan Insurance Agency.
All right, and for those that are still with us on Facebook Live, again, we're going to kind of go through some of the other impacts because wind and rainfall really don't appear to be the big factors from this storm. Rainfall rates or rainfall amounts are looking at 3 to 6 inches, and a lot of that is going to be more Mississippi, Alabama, and toward Florida, the eastern side of the storm. Spots may only see about an inch or two through the day Saturday and into Sunday. So rainfall amounts from Nate right now are not looking substantial in southeast Louisiana right now. And again, that's why we don't want to let our guard down. Yes, it's certainly great news for Louisiana with that shift in the track, but that does not really change anything in terms of your preparation. You still need to prepare for the storm. So let's go back to our graphics and show you what we're looking at in terms of possibility of storm surge. Now, this is the slosh model. This is one of the models that the Hurricane Center uses in order to predict storm surge. Hurricane Center and even the folks that have developed the slosh model admit that it's not the greatest because there are so many parameters that go into a storm surge that this could greatly change. But the model is calling for at most about a 12-foot surge kind of in the Biloxi Marsh, so eastern St. Bernard, and then along the the Mississippi coastline. Hurricane Center, National Weather Service office out of Slidell calling for 6 to 9 feet at most outside of the levee protection system, so coastal areas and even along the lakeshore. So because of that, we do have storm surge warnings that are in effect. All of those parishes and counties are highlighted, but it's really just the lakeshore and coastal areas that are going to be affected by this, as again, we're anticipating a 6 to 9 foot above ground elevation in water outside of the hurricane, the protection levee system. Here are some of the impacts of what we're anticipating here as we get into Saturday. Storm surge, we just kind of went through that. Rainfall, 3 to 6 inches, perhaps some localized higher areas where you could get some flooding. Not anticipating widespread flooding from this event. Tropical storm force winds moving into parts of southeast Louisiana, southern Mississippi by later in the day on Saturday. So maybe as soon as Saturday afternoon and definitely into Saturday evening and Saturday night. Here's what a couple of the computer models are looking at. The GFS model, this is kind of in line with what the Hurricane Center is thinking. Again, kind of a trend toward the coast of Louisiana and then that little bit of a turn toward the mouth of the river and coastal Mississippi and southern Alabama. The European model, and we're starting to get some new data in here. European has a little bit more more southeast Louisiana before continuing along that more northeasterly trend back up toward the northeast. Once inland, it's going to be pushing away from Louisiana, and in fact, we're going to stay on the drier side as we get later into the day, Sunday and Monday. So conditions by Sunday should be actually rapidly improving as we get to the midday and afternoon hours. And in fact, we have we've already stated here at Channel 4, we're going to be showing you the NFL game that we have on at noon Sunday with no anticipation of preempting that by any means. It looks like conditions here will be improving dramatically as we get into Sunday afternoon. Again, here's kind of the upper level steering. We still have, and I'm going to jump over to our water vapor here just to show you. We still have this big upper level trough that is out in kind of the southwestern Gulf now. Now that is moving away, but kind of the influence of that big upper level trough, plus you got this kind of general flow, this almost broad upper level low. This is called the Central American Gyre, and Nate is kind of underneath that, and so you've kind of got that influences with upper high or subtropical ridge out to the east that has been kind of pushing this along, and that's been the reason for this kind of rapid motion towards the north. Now, at one time, it was looking like this subtropical ridge, you see that big high, it was looking like at one time this was going to be pushing westward. This was going to be kind of blocking Nate from making that turn toward the northeast. Well, now it looks like because it is moving so rapidly, we were always anticipating a very rapid motion once in the Gulf of Mexico. Weren't really anticipating this very rapid motion in the Caribbean. Well, now with it moving at 21 miles an hour, it actually looks like it's going to outrun the subtropical ridge. So by the time the ridge builds in, Nate will already be well inland and kind of making that turn up toward the northeast. That's why a lot of the models and at the Hurricane Center kind of calling for that more northward and then northeast turn sooner rather than later, because the ridge won't have built in fast enough to kind of prevent that eastward trend from happening. We've also got a couple of upper level troughs moving across the central United States, and it looks like that's kind of the reason why we're likely going to see Nate kind of making that more dramatic turn, or not even a dramatic turn, but that more northeasterly turn over the, well, I say a couple of days, really not even a day by the time it starts making more of that trend or that turn toward the northeast and toward more the mouth of the river and then the Mississippi coast. So just to kind of reiterate the impacts that we're going to see here. Coastal flooding with a storm surge of 6 to 9 feet outside of the levee protection system. For folks, again, Metro New Orleans, areas within the levee protection system, higher ground on the North Shore, storm surge is not an issue. Now, folks, along the lakefront, along Lake Maurepas, Venetian Isles, Eden Isles, Mississippi coast, no levees there. Parts of St. Bernard, parts of Lower Plaquemines, parts of Lower Jefferson. Those are areas that will see that water higher. And again, it's not going to last long. We should see the winds start to change direction pretty quickly on Sunday, which will start to help push that water back out. But that's where we're likely to see the greatest inundation of any kind of storm surge or higher than normal tides. Rainfall rates, 3 to 6 inches, maybe some areas greater, but a lot of the greatest of that is going to be more east of the center of the storm, which is more away from southeast Louisiana. Also, those tropical storm force winds as we get later into the day, Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning. But as I mentioned, with a fast-moving storm, we should see the impacts from Nate quickly improving as we get more into the mid part of the day on Sunday. So I know a lot going on. We're going to be watching this very closely through the course of the day today. We'll be doing hourly updates here. We'll have more with a special edition of Eyewitness News coming up at 4 o'clock. And remember, at 4 o'clock, we'll have not only new coordinates, but also a new track from the Hurricane Center. So we'll be here rest of the day today, and we're looking at kind of a long haul on Saturday for all day Saturday and going into early on Sunday morning. So we'll be here with you until Nate is north of us and no longer a threat. For now, I'm meteorologist Chris Franklin in the Pinpoint Forecast Center.